welcome back to Propulsion Lab at Swiss Container Native Day. And my next guest is Aarno. Welcome, Aarno.
Thank you, bro.
So, very interesting topic you suggested and very dear to our heart in Build Propulsion Lab. And I'll explain in a second why. The complexities of the cloud-native world. And, well, there are obviously undoubtful complexities. And for me, those complexities are one of the reasons why after, 15 years of DevOps, DevOps is still something that everybody talk about, but not exactly everybody do it, right? And I think one of the reasons is not that people don't want to, not that people don't know the principles, not that people don't realize the value, but it's just like when you come with this myriad of new tools and technologies and processes, and you try to reach across the divide from ops, who are the owners of all this infrastructure, to the developers that should understand it and operate that, they're like, you know what, fuck this shit. It's like, it's too much. It's too much. It's too much. And this obviously hinders developer productivity, which is the essence of Build Propulsion Lab. And this is why I'm so excited about this interview, because that's exactly what we are talking about.
Perfect.
So talk to me about that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it was something that triggered me, I think, on Twitter or something the last few months. Kind of the, of course, it's kind of this ongoing discussion, right? Kubernetes is super complex, right? There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of config options and stuff. But I guess, and I agree, right? That's absolutely correct, right? I think there's, with great power comes great complexity. And if you want to do a lot of different stuff, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of knobs that you have to turn or to be able to turn. I personally believe it's still a great tool. And I guess the power of default, so that there's a default config that already makes sense, that you get started with. And then if your use cases needs a different config setting option, you can configure it. It's not like gone or hidden. It's just like the default works well enough for most of the people, right?
Well, this is true to an extent, but also there are like 5 certifications for you to obtain to actually do something in Kubernetes that are different from default. And I wonder, it's maybe just the perception of the complexity of it that kind of terrifies the developers. But it's not only about Kubernetes, right? So Kubernetes takes care of the infrastructure, and we can argue if it's developer friendly enough or not, but it definitely obscures and abstracts a lot of like the network heavy protocol bullshit that no one wants to deal with. So there obviously like there are merits.
Yes.
But it's not only that, there is complexity all the way going up as well.
Exactly, yeah. And I guess I think you made a good summary, right? I mean, there's the whole managing compute, managing network, managing storage. I mean, that's super complex topic. And I guess Kubernetes does an okay job trying to abstract it and make it easier to use and consume. And of course, what's the alternative, right? You go and manage VMs by hand as we did like 15 years ago or before. Or you try to automate that end-to-end using immutable infrastructure. Nobody did that 50 years ago. It would have been possible using the tools that we already had at the time.
Absolutely.
It was just too complex, right?
Right.
And
obviously credit when credit due.
Exactly.
We made a huge progress. But
I guess
also
the next step, right?
Exactly.
I mean, now that we have a platform that is standard, that is scalable, that can handle your application, I think there's a whole set of stuff around that is still hard and difficult to manage, right? And for me, that's kind of the next frontier. So from your application, there's this whole ecosystem of services like databases, cache queue, reverse proxy, whatever you need around that you still need to manage, right? Some of them you can deploy yourself into your Kubernetes cluster. Okay, it's taken care of. It's the same tooling, the same stuff that you use for your application. But as soon as you use cloud services around it, as soon as there's like, CDN and databases and stuff involved, you probably don't want to do it yourself in your Kubernetes cluster. Well, now you have 2 problems, right? Now you have like Terraform and Ansible, or use ClickOps to click them in a web GUI, right? I mean, that just sucks. And you're back into this manual working habit that we did like, with applications 10, 15 years ago.
I love the ClickOps. I didn't know this term. It's perfect. And you know what? Let's add to that. So you manage all that in production, but you also need to manage all that for your developer environment.
Absolutely.
And it's different now.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean that adds to the if you do it once or twice, that's even okay, right? As soon as you want to do like feature branch deployments where each developer gets their own environment, I mean you cannot do that manually, right? That's just not feasible. Or then you're back into the. Do you know that like there's some developers they have the luxury of having a dedicated testing environment so they don't have to test in production, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
that is feasible when you have the tooling around it to be able to do that, right?
So how do we solve it? How can we reduce this complexity not only for the operations people that need to orchestrate all this zoo in production, but also to reduce this anxiety of developers who are looking into that and go like, we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Here's our app, do your thing over
Whatever,
there.
yeah.
And that's exactly back where we started before
Exactly,
DevOps.
absolutely, yeah. So for me personally, that exactly is the core of platform engineering, right? The DevOps part for me has been moving more and more like in the software development process and software development lifecycle, right? It's about the custom software, right? And then there's the platform engineering part, which is about the standardized services that are supported by a team that can handle the complexity behind it, and they expose an API that then DevOps people, software development people can use that masks some of the complexity away, for example, by default, but still enable you to control it, and especially control the when do you deploy, how do you deploy, where do you deploy. That's all handled by the team that actually then owns the application. But you have a team of platform engineers to take care of the handling the complexity, understanding what's behind it. You have a database service, and you have a monitoring service, and a backup service, and networking, whatever it's needed around it, right? And being able to support the users of that service with that complexity.
So it's someone who writes all those YAML files. Eventually, we have someone who writes the YAML files.
Somewhere there's probably going to be YAML involved, yes.
A lot.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, but what you describe sounds to me exactly like the SRE.
Yes, exactly.
So is it like just a new rebranding of SRE?
For me personally, SRE is mostly involved in the operations of the custom software. Custom software, of course, if you are a database team, then your custom software is a database service, right? But for me, platform engineering is more about taking the existing services, combining them, managing the abstraction, managing the complexity of that, and making it available, usually to an internal team that handles then the complexity of the business logic of the application, right? So it's a different problem, right? There's SREs involved in running the custom software. There might be SREs involved in running the standard software like databases and stuff, right? But for platform engineering is more of the combination of software, right? And also giving the tooling and the support for the tooling that then the consumers can use, right? And that's not typically maybe an SRE problem.
Right.
In my perception, right?
Yeah, interesting. I was wondering about how they differ because I hear a lot of like, hey, SREs are rebranding and platform engineers just because that's the next.
But absolutely,
hot
but
thing.
I mean, there's a Finnish saying that there's a love's child has many names, right? And of course, and I think it's also maybe a sign of the maturity of our industry, right? From what we saw was DevOps 10 years ago, it has kind of crystallize different parts of DevOps, right? We have the developer education part of DevOps, right? We have the systems administration part of DevOps. We have the managing, like handling risk and availability, which is a lot of the SRE stuff, right? That has 10 years ago, everything was in DevOps, right? And now we call them different names to more specifically explain what we mean and why we need it, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, when we talk about those platform engineers who try to orchestrate this complexity for the rest of the organization, both bottom and up,
Yep.
right? Both for the infrastructure and for apps. Are there tools emerging in this space? So there are like your obvious tools for platform engineers like Backstage and what's not.
Exactly, yeah.
How do they help? Or maybe there are others that kind of help solving this complexity?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the de facto standard in now to manage infrastructure has been Terraform, right? And OpenTofu, the fork. I mean, that's been a lot of the thing. What I like about Terraform and colleagues is, of course, the breadth of services available, breadth of integrations. There's a lot of people that know it. But what I don't like about Terraform is kind of the statefulness of the of applying it, right? I mean, worst case, you're running on your laptop, and then you're on holidays, and somebody else runs off their laptops, and they don't have the Terraform state file and it's not up to date, and mayhem ensures, right? I mean, so you have to build a GitOps pipeline for your Terraform, and now you have two problems, right? You have a pipeline for your own code, you have a pipeline for Terraform code, and it's not getting easier, right?
So from the distinction that we spoke about earlier about SREs and platform engineers, it sounds like Terraform is an SRE tool that manages the complexity of your particular application with the Terraform Terraform landscape that describes a very particular business case, right? So platform engineers, they probably use something else.
Absolutely. And I personally believe that we have already an excellent control plane to control our applications and their networking and their storage called Kubernetes. It's already there, right? And what I like particularly about it is the declarativeness, right? I declare how I want to have it. I don't declare how to do it. And thus the Kubernetes control plane can do it in the background by itself. And I think there's now more and more tooling that builds up on top of these declaratives. So, for example, Crossplane, the CNCF project, where they use the power of Kubernetes to declare a state and making sure that it ensures. And then, for example, Crossplane has the concept of being able then to template stuff, right? So as a platform team, I can template the database service to include the monitoring and the backup and the networking, whatever that's needed. And I don't have to each and every use of the database to do that. I can offer that as a bundle, right? And then I have Crossplane doing all the standard heavy lifting of then talking to APIs and instantiating them and managing the different infrastructures and the life cycle, all of that, right? I mean, it's the operator or the trivial operator is very trivial, but once you include life cycle and all of that, right, there's already like an open source tool doing it all for you.
Yep, that's very true. So, in the end of the day, we're back to where we started, Kubernetes, but for different plane. I love
Exactly.
I love how plane is actually applied to planes of applications. This is exactly how it should be.
Absolutely, I agree, and I think that's a great way. And you asked about tools specifically, right? It's a great way to use the same base, Kubernetes in this case, right, to manage the different aspects of the problems that we're having when we want to run applications, right?
Yep.
And I guess that makes it, again, even though Kubernetes is a complex beast, it makes it easier because you can use the same primitives, you have the same type of working, and you only have, for example, one GitOps pipeline as application developer that manages not only your application, but also the whole ecosystem around it.
So, but I would say, to summarize, yes, probably developers should learn something about Kubernetes at the end of the day, and no amount of platform engineering will help in protecting them from learning, but it's also a tool that if you use it correctly on multiple planes, how great it fits, then actually it will help reducing the complexity not only of your infrastructure, network security and what's not, but also what's above it, and that's your complex application topology with multiple users and actors and what's not.
Exactly, yeah.
Fascinating. Aarno, we learned. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
And for you all, we have more interviews of Propulsion Lab at Swiss Cloud Native Day coming up soon. Stay tuned.